Hello, this is ACastro, and this is my presentation on the Hedwig glass beakers for History 498. The points that I'm going to cover for this presentation include an overview of what the Hedwig glass beakers are. After this presentation, you should be able to identify who the Hedwig Duchess of Silesia is. You should be able to explain the origin of the glass beakers and describe the significance of how they ended up in Europe during the late 12th century. And you should be able to understand how trade was maintained and remained unhindered during an unsettled time in history. So what the Hedwig glass beakers were is they were a set of drinking glasses. There was an unknown amount of glasses in total. They were given to the Duchess of Hedwig in the late 12th century. There's a picture of the glasses on the right-hand side of the slide. They were intricately designed. They were made of thick glass. Most of them were of a smoky topaz color, 8 inches in height. They looked similar to a small vase, and they had a wide rim, and they were really difficult to drink out of. So they were drinking glasses, but because of their shape and design, they didn't work very well for drinking glasses. So they weren't really typical. So more on the purpose of these glasses. They were given to the Duchess of Silesia, or the Duchess Hedwig of Silesia. The Duchess Hedwig was married to Henry the Bearded, who was the Duke of Silesia. The Duchess and the Duke of Silesia had 7 children, and after they had 7 children, they both decided to take vows of abstinence, and she began taking on saintly tendencies, such as starting a hospital for the sick, and she helped nuns in the convent. As an example of some of the tendencies that she began to take on is she would use the water that the nuns washed their feet in to wash her eyes and face, as well as the heads of her grandchildren, because she felt that the water would give the children salvation. Hedwig would also only drink water, even though at the time it was safer to drink wine, because the water was not clean and she could get dysentery from it. So her husband was really concerned that she wasn't drinking wine and that she was only drinking water, because it would put her at risk of getting very sick. The glasses were used by Hedwig. The glass beakers were used by Hedwig to demonstrate the miracle of turning water into wine. This miracle was contrasted to the miracle of Christ performing his first miracle at the wedding of Cana, where he turned water into wine. The Duchess of Hedwig was later declared a saint by the Church in 1267, and her name was Saint Hedwig, Duchess of Silesia, and her miracle was the miracle of wine. So the origin of these glasses. We now know that the glass material was made of soda glass. So the soda glass was restricted during this time period to glass made only in the Islamic world between 900 and 1250. So we know that the glasses must have come from that part of the world during this time, because the soda glass was not being made in Europe. So the glass beakers of the Hedwig glass beakers must have come via trade routes to Europe. It's thought that the glass beakers were likely given to Hedwig by her brother-in-law because he spent time on the trade routes, and pieces of these glass beakers have been found in his estate. So they are thought to come to Europe via the trade routes and come through the Crusader port city of Acre. And even though it's not documented that these glass beakers were brought in, they are thought that they were likely brought in under the name Muslim pottery, which was a regular import brought in from Europe. So trade during the Crusades. The Crusades were a really intense time period. There was war, it was dangerous, there was political unrest going on throughout the regions. But trade was largely tolerated and encouraged and actually stimulated by Crusaders. So even though it was a dangerous time period, trade actually remained functional and went rather well. The ideas between trade was pragmatic, and people thought of it as more practical. So as long as money was being made by both sides, Crusaders were really for trade, and it was encouraged. The other idea between trade during the Crusades is that people's ideological views, so the views between Christians and Muslims as an example, were not used as a consideration when people were importing luxuries, for example. So people from or Christians from Europe would still want to import luxuries from Islamic countries without taking into consideration differing ideological views. So trade continued during this time. So connections with the Lou Book. I found a connection in document 30 where the travels of Jubar was discussed. Jubar was a Muslim scholar born in Spain who was on pilgrimage to the Holy Lands. In this document, he talks about how even though it was during the Crusades, the Christians would tax the Muslims, the Muslims would tax the Christians, so it was kind of equal in terms of trade in that terms, and they both had an equal desire for goods, which was traded between them. So peaceful trade and equal treatment was mutually agreed upon in regards to trade. So trade during this time of Crusades and political unrest was continuing to function well. And again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, Crusaders allowed trade to continue to happen during this time as there was money to be made by both parties. And again, the Hedwig glass beakers were able to find their way into Europe during this time through a Crusader port, thought to be through the city of Acre. So these are just the sources that I used for this presentation. Thank you so much for taking time to view it.